Thank you.
Okay.
I had a question. Would you say that emotions are developed because of evolution and you know during the hunter-gatherer period of humanity, and so like a lot of the problems we have in the world today are because people are acting on those emotions, and you know, do you have any comments on that? Yeah.
Well, I think this is a very interesting idea, and it is something that lots of researchers are working on. So the thing about being in a hunter-gatherer group is really and truly nearly all of these groups are actually gatherer-hunter groups. So if you look at the Bushmen or the indigenous people in Australia, mostly what they're doing is gathering, and then occasionally, you know, some people go and catch a wild animal and that supplements the diet. But often it's, you know, something of the order of 85% of the diet comes from gathering and something of the order of 15% from hunting. But really the important aspect of this is that people live in face-to-face societies. Now we do live in face-to-face societies, so for instance you're forming a community of people here in the Centre for Inquiry, and you get to know these people, and the emotions that evolve among hunter-gatherers are not inappropriate to that. The totally destructive emotions that we human beings have are emotions of contempt for others in groups that are different than our own. And you know, if there's a big emotional problem for humankind, it's that. And you do indeed see it in societies that, you know, are living in these ways. And I mean, quite often, like in North America, for instance, see what happens if a society gets much above 150 people, it tends to split in two. So in North America there's a lot of space, and this group could go off here and that group could go off there, and they never need to see each other again. If they're in a situation where they do see each other, then these internecine wars and quarrels can start up, and that occurs really when we start to identify ourselves as us as compared with them. That's the real destructiveness of emotions. But I mean, you know, sorry, I could go on at some length about this, but that's the kind of direction I would be thinking.
My question is, what do you think about emotions not necessarily being described with words, and the intelligence being linked to one's intuition? Because, you know, as I go through life and I ask people, people usually say that if they had listened to their intuition, they would have taken the right decision, but they didn't. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's a very interesting issue, and I think we are indeed constantly going backwards and forwards between verbal forms and intuitions. Now, the best hypothesis that I know for the origins of human language, this sort of again comes back to this, you know, how people lived in our ancestors, is something of the order of 500,000 years ago. Looks as if it was the time when language emerged, and language emerged as a means of maintaining relationships in the group of people who you know. Before that, and you still see it in chimpanzees and other primates, the way you maintain your relationship is you sit down with another individual, you have a bit of a cuddle, and then you start stroking them, and you go through their fur to pick out twigs and insects and so on. It's called grooming. And chimpanzees and monkeys spend something of the order of 20% of their time doing this. And it's the way that you maintain your relationships in the social group, in your alliances. Now, what happened with the evolution of human beings is the number of people who existed in the social group. Once they get up to, I mean, for chimpanzees, the maximum number of individuals you can know is something of the order of 45 or 50. For us human beings, it's something more like the number of people in this room. That's to say, know well enough to, let's say, have had a meal with them, know something about their parents and their offspring and so on. So you know them well. All right. So imagine spending 20% of your time one-on-one doing grooming in a group of 50. Now that group changes to 150 or 200. You're now going to have to spend 80% of your time, right, doing this. And it can't be done. Primates actually don't have enough time to do that. The maximum amount of time you could spend doing this is about 30%. So the evolutionary psychologist, a guy called Robin Dunbar, has argued that's the point where human language emerges. And it emerges not to, work out, okay, there's a buffalo over there, you and I are going to go and chase it. It emerges as a way of developing and maintaining our relationships in conversation, and you can do it with more than one person at a time, you can do it when you're cooking, you can do it when you're walking along. So that's really what language is about. All right, so your question, you see, is terribly interesting, because if I'm going to be talking about our relationship, or, this emotion that I've had when this terrible thing happened, or you're going to tell me about how you're really looking, okay, you've actually got to turn that into words, you see, because that's then going to be part of the mediator of our relationship. So I know absolutely what you mean, but I wouldn't give up on the words just yet. I think they're very important for us human beings, but the intuitions are as well, of course. So I think the issue is translating between them.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi. Okay.
Traditionally, psychologists and philosophers have claimed that emotions are linked with past experience, or they're also irrational. So I would like to hear your comments on that. And you talked about acquiring EQ. So presumably 11-year-olds don't have much past experience to go on in order to express their emotions.
No, it's an interesting.
So is that linked? Like, are undeveloped emotions irrational, and as you develop your EQ, they become more rational, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, these are deep questions, so I have to answer it right now. I think what happens is, as you go through life, you do get to understand more about yourself and your emotions. And, many of us have that as a kind of life task. I'd like to be able to understand myself better and really to be more in touch with myself and other people. And I think that's certainly the case. And I think lots of people who are interested in therapy, for instance, do it for that kind of reason. So what you started off by saying is, all right, now, what about the emotions of the past? So people who've had, quite difficult childhoods, people who've been, say, beaten up by their parents, there's a kind of tendency towards anger and getting their own back in relationships. Actually, a particularly famous guy in emotion research had a father who was especially horrible to him, and he's quite an angry guy, but at the same time, part of his life project is to sort of understand this better so that he can actually have better relationships. And in fact, he has them with his wife and children. It's actually other emotion researchers he's been a bit paranoid about. So I think this idea, it seems to me, I'm just talking in an intuitive way.